But we begin tonight with consequences, because elections are about more than just who you pick to be president. It's also about who that president chooses to have around them. The people who will have access to some of the nation's most classified secrets, who will oversee millions of federal workers and multi-billion-dollar budgets, making life or death decisions for American citizens day in and day out. And if you thought that Donald Trump, who, along with his MAGA cronies, railed about DEI hires being so unqualified in the Biden era because, well, they're not white guys. If you thought he would pick only the most competent and qualified people for these positions, well, just take a look at his incoming national security team. It includes John Phelan, who Trump announced last night as his pick for Secretary of the Navy, a businessman and investor with no military experience whatsoever. If confirmed, he would be the first person in 15 years to lead the Navy without ever having served in any branch of the armed forces. So, why would Trump pick him, you ask? Well, according to Politico, Phelan was a major donor to the Trump campaign and reportedly hosted the president-elect at his Aspen, Colorado home this summer, where Trump went on a profanity-laced tirade about immigration and warned that the election could be the last the United States ever had if Kamala Harris had won. Apparently, that's all it takes. There's also Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, who has never worked in the intelligence field or even served on a Congressional Intelligence Committee. But she has been accused of amplifying Russian propaganda, and in 2017, she met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. If confirmed, she would oversee all 18 of the nation's intelligence agencies. Oh, and the list goes on. Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has no senior military or national security experience. Instead, he's known for hosting Fox's weekend morning show. And he's been accused of sexually assaulting a woman in 2017, for which he denies any wrongdoing, but paid out a settlement to his accuser, making her sign an NDA. And don't even get me started on Sebastian Gorka, the far-right commentator who Trump picked for senior director for counterterrorism. You may remember him from Trump's first administration when he attended the inaugural ball wearing a medal associated with a Hungarian national group that's linked to Nazi Germany. These are just some of the very fine people Donald Trump wants to put in charge of our national security. Because when it comes to a job in the second Trump administration, forget expertise. Apparently, all you need is a lot of cash and or absolute loyalty to Trump. Throw in some favorable appearances on Fox and bam, you're hired. Welcome to the Kakistocracy, America. Joining me now is Jelani Cobb, Dean of Columbia University School of Journalism and staff writer for The New Yorker, and Tom Nichols, staff writer for The Atlantic, and conveniently an expert in things national security in Russia. I do want to come to you first on this, Tom, because the national security apparatus has generally been a professionalist, a sort of professional operation, that and the kind of military leadership. What Donald Trump seems to be doing is picking people who have the right ideological makeup, who believe what he wants, or who have the right sort of troll makeup to be willing to troll the agencies they're supposed to lead, or maybe to deconstruct them. How do you read these picks?
It's a combination of all of those. You can never underestimate the kind of trolly nature of all of this activity that both infuriates Trump's opponents and is really gratifying to the MAGA faithful, to the MAGA base, who think that the intelligence community, is this shadowy, dark cabal that's out to get Donald Trump. There's also the problem that, as you pointed out, these are professional fields that are normally staffed by experts. And the problem for a would-be authoritarian leader is that experts are the people who tell you what you can and can't really do. They're the ones that come in and give you the bad news and say that's not going to work, or, that's going to be a problem, or here are the things you should think about. He doesn't want anybody doing that. He wants people to say, fabulous idea, Mr. President, and, we'll get right on that. And so the way you get around that is that you put somebody on top of all these professionals who still are required there to run the day-to-day operations that keep the United States safe. But you put somebody on top of it that makes them afraid to come forward and say, this is what you need to tell the president. So it kind of chokes off all of that expert opinion at that level.
Right, and I think part of this, Jelani, there is a broader death of expertise. I think actually Thomas would have coined that term. That people in the sort of base of the country, a lot of people just don't trust experts anymore. They think somebody who's got a PhD, they're suspicious of that person automatically, right? But if they're on TV, they trust them more. If they're on a podcast, they trust them more. They just don't trust experts. And so Donald Trump really, in a sense, is fulfilling his base's desire to end expertise. The Tea Party movement was about that. We just want Joe the Butcher in there. We want somebody like me. But here's the problem. When it comes to the United States military, right, the ideological shift, if you are a woman in the military or if you're somebody like Mark Esper, who had to tell Donald Trump, no, sir, you cannot have the military shoot protesters in the leg. He had to tell him you cannot do that. Now you're replacing with somebody like Pete Hegseth. Here's what the allegation is per NBC. There's detailed allegations of a sexual assault by him, allegedly. The Washington Post says that he paid the accuser, but still denies the assault. His attorney says he's completely innocent. The incident was investigated. Police found the allegation to be false, but that's not true. The fact that they didn't charge him does not mean that it was found to be false. This woman is still out there under an NDA. Here's what Tammy Duckworth, who gave both her legs in Iraq as a fighting woman in the United States military, said about his nomination.
Remember that we've just fought over a decade of fights and overhauled the military and its treatment of military sexual trauma. It's frankly an insult and really troubling that Mr. Trump would nominate someone who has admitted that he's paid off a victim who has claimed rape allegations against him. This is not the kind of person you want to lead the Department of Defense.
If you're a woman in the military, this becomes an existential almost crisis for you, that this will be the leader on top of the allegations against Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief himself.
So there are a few things here, one of which is that, the military has been devastated. This is a 20-year battle that we're talking about, to really bring to the foreground the prevalence of sexual assault, within the military. And so, Senator Duckworth is absolutely right about that, and she'd know better than anyone else would, about the issues that women have dealt with in the military. And so symbolically, irrespective of kind of where this case is in its adjudication, symbolically, it sends a message that this is maybe not an offense, maybe not something that is career-ending or that is being taken very seriously. One other point, regarding the intelligence community, there's a long history, and we would do well to reflect upon what happened during that first Trump term about his fraught relationship with his very own intelligence, officers. If you recall that incredible situation in Helsinki in 2018, where U.S. intelligence gave Donald Trump the information and said that Russia had attempted to interfere in the 2016 election, and standing directly next to Vladimir Putin, he valued Putin's denial over the intelligence that his very own community gave. He said, quote, I don't see why it would be Vladimir Putin, responsible for this interference. And so this is not a new issue that we're dealing with.
And this brings me right to, and it is a perfect place to put back to you, Tom, because this is where the red pilling of Donald Trump becomes policy, right? Donald Trump doesn't trust the intelligence services because they busted Vladimir Putin trying to help him get elected. He still wants to litigate that. He doesn't trust the FBI because his home was raided because he stole classified documents. Therefore, he doesn't want them to even vet these people. He wants them to come in unvetted. When it comes to Mr. Hegseth, he was flagged by the Pentagon because of these tats that he has on. And some of them have been linked in some ways to people who have similar tats, including one called Deus Vult, that white supremacists have tended to use. They flagged him as an insider threat. Deus Vult is Latin for God wills it. He called himself being flagged as somebody who should not be able to work on Joe Biden's detail, President Biden's detail. He called that anti-Christian bigotry and says that ends the day that he comes into the Department of Defense. That could mean theoretically, Tom Nichols, that we are now letting in people who've got all kinds of tats We don't know what kinds and what they signify. What they're saying is they don't like this feminization of the military, where they're letting trans people in, where they're letting more women in. He's been very clear that they want back a more macho, old-fashioned military the way he thinks it should be. But that could theoretically also mean letting in extremists. That's where we're headed.
Yeah, this is, I mean, part of that where we'll end up is opening those doors wider for people that might have been disqualified for military service simply because Pete Hegseth is mad. Because he feels that he was poorly treated. I mean, this is this constant stream of grievance that runs through all of these people that surround Trump. If you look at all of them closely, you'll always find there's some place that's kind of their origin story about where they felt they were denied something that they were entitled to, that they felt they were judged unfairly, and that they're kind of out to, get even with everybody. And this comes back to your point about the red pilling of Trump. He's always been this way. There's no pill involved. I mean, Trump has always bristled at anyone he thinks disagrees with him. He hates anyone who's tried to hold him accountable for anything at any point in his life. I mean, you can see this going, some of us were aware of Donald Trump before he ran for president in the 80s and 90s. This is just who he is and who they are, that accountability is for other people, that consequences are for suckers, that they just have this kind of constant sense that any professional who puts the national interest above their own personal interest is obviously an idiot and therefore not to be trusted.